Welcome everybody to today's webinar, 3 features that make the Visual Advanced Production Scheduler advanced. My name is Martin Karlovic and I'm CEO and co-owner of NETRONIC Software from Germany, and I'm the host for you today for this webinar. I hope that you are still safe and healthy, and thankful that you are here with me today, joining me for this webinar. We noticed today that we need to come up with some new webinar ideas for May and June, because I recognize that the webinars are well attended this year, and also we're getting quite nice feedback after the webinar, so thank you for this. And whenever you see something in the webinar that you don't understand, then please ask a question. You're all on mute so that we don't get disturbed by background noises, but you can ask questions through the GoToWebinar chat pane. Typically, when I'm on PowerPoint, I will see that you're asking a question right away, and then I'll answer it right away. When I'm doing demos, I, from time to time, do not see this little icon that tells me that there is a question, and then I will answer your question after the demo. If there is any topic that you would like me to cover in one of the upcoming webinars, then please let me know, and I will just do it. So if you tell me, Martin, do a webinar, I mean, it should be related to what we as NETRONIC do. But if there is something that you're particularly interested in, then let me know. And either I will do it or one of my colleagues will do it. But I'm definitely open for suggestions. And I'm not doing this to entertain myself, but I'm doing this to give you information, to make you smart about what we do, about how you can best use our product. So if there is anything you would like us to cover, then please let us know. And with this, let's get this going. And I already said it at the beginning of the last webinar, and I'm repeating it, is actually in these days of everybody working from home, I decided to come up with a new format of providing information to you guys. And this is what I call the Business Central Manufacturing Show. This is a podcast that I started to do, in which I very consciously and very rigidly not speak about products. So this is not a marketing show about NETRONIC products, nor is this a marketing show about any other products, but this is me meeting with experienced people from the Business Central ecosystem, experienced people with a clear focus on manufacturing. So I spoke to Pike Beck Andersen from Denmark, who has written the book about Dynamics Nav and manufacturing. I spoke to AJ from the US, who has done a lot of manufacturing projects. I spoke to Sune Lose from Denmark, who has done more than 750 videos about Business Central and with a strong focus on manufacturing. I recorded a session with actually with a former production planner from Belgium who now works for a partner. I will talk to a Canadian manufacturing specialist this week, and I have lined up of further speakers for the next couple of weeks. And so this is always me being the moderator, asking questions, and then getting really first-hand feedback, first-hand impressions, first-hand tips and tricks. Everything centered around Business Central and manufacturing. So follow this link, go to our website. There you can listen into all the episodes, but you also find this on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and whatever podcast station you have. So this is really, if you're in Business Central and manufacturing, and I sense you are because you're watching this webinar, then please get on this webpage at netronic.com/Business Central Manufacturing Show and subscribe to this podcast. It's useful, in-depth information. It is easy to consume. Each episode is 20 to 25 or 15 to 25 minutes, so short and crisp on the point. And it's not me talking about NETRONIC stuff, but it is me talking with Business Central manufacturing experts. So I started doing this, and to me, it's really fun. I get smarter with every episode I do, and the good thing is I get this knowledge first because I'm doing the interviews and I'm doing the post-processing, but I really like to share it. So it's completely free. You don't need to register for it. You don't need to fill out a form. You just go there and listen. and hear what all the experts have to say. And with this, let's jump to our webinar today. Things that I prepared is we want to talk about the three things that make the Visual Advanced Production Scheduler advanced. And actually, there are four things that make the Visual Advanced Production Scheduler advanced. And the one is finite capacity scheduling. And I decided to run a separate webinar on finite capacity scheduling. And I think I did it 2 weeks ago. So I will not talk about finite capacity scheduling today. But if you're interested in this, go to our website or go to our YouTube channel and look for recorded webinars. And there you find a webinar from 2 weeks ago that was 60 minutes plus a little bit on finite capacity scheduling. So the other 3 points that make the Visual Advanced Production Scheduler advanced is first, what we call the EMAT, the earliest material availability date. Second, what we call production simulations, and third, alternative machine centers. And with this, let's look into this, and I will look into all 3 points, and all 3 points are accompanied also by demos. And then at the end, I will share some roadmap information about the VAPS with you guys. But with this, again, there are 4 things that make the Visual Advanced Production Scheduler advanced, but the finite capacity scheduling was part of a separate webinar 2 weeks ago. Just go there, have a look, and watch to it there. So now let's talk about what we call the EMAT. And the EMAT is an abbreviation that came into the product during the development phase. And at some point of time, we just decided to kind of continue work with this phrase. So whenever you see EMAT in the software or in the documentation or our presentation, it stands for earliest material availability date. So let's talk about some very basics of this date that we actually calculate. So within the VAPS, within the product called Visual Advanced Production Scheduler, which is available for all Business Central versions and which you can get as an on-premise version, but is also available on AppSource. Within this product, we calculate a date that we call earliest material availability date. So this is the earliest date that for a production order all required material is available. So right now we produce it on production order level, not on a routing line or on operation level. This is something that we might do in the future, but this adds a lot of complexity. So right now we decided to calculate a date that indicates to you, hey, is my material available or not on production order level? And so this value that we calculate is called EMAT, and EMAT stands for earliest material availability date. So what do we do and how do we calculate it? So actually the calculation of the EMAT has to be, as of now, triggered by the user. So you literally press a button that says calculate EMAT. And when you press this button, we create a unique list of component demand day by day by day. We start from the work date and we go to a future date that you can define. And when we create this unique list of component demand, we take into account demand from production orders, from sales orders, from transfer lines, and so on and so forth. Then once we have for every day this unique list of component demand, we also create a unique list of component supply day by day by day by day. And we take into account supply on inventory, supply from purchase orders, supply from production orders, and so on and so forth. And then we compare for every day and every component. We compare what we have as a component supply and what we have component demand. And if there is enough component supply for that day, then we make an allocation of component supply to component demand. And the way of how we do is, of course, we first remove any reservation. So reserved components will never get allocated. So we only look at, let's say, free or available or potentially available components. And then as a day by day by day, we allocate an available component to a component demand. And you can, as a user, define the priority, which demand to supply first. So you can say, okay, I want to fulfill the sales orders demand first, or I want to fulfill the production orders demand first. So this is something that you can define. And if there is enough component supply on a certain day, we allocate that supply to the component line and have an earliest material availability date for that component. And then we look at all component line on the production order, take the latest date and declare this as the EMAT, the earliest material availability date. So let's have a look. Let's see what here the case is. We have, let's say, for 5 days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and we just look at one component, and we have a supply of this one component on Monday of 100, Tuesday 500, Wednesday 300, Thursday 550, and Friday 60. And this is just the amount of supply per day. And this could come from inventory or from purchase orders, from production orders, from whatever supply sources we have, and this is the total demand for that component on that day that we have. And so now on this Monday we can do an allocation because we have a supply of 100, we need 50, and so we can allocate this. On Tuesday we can't do an allocation because we have 500 and we need 600. On Wednesday we can allocate, and here we can't allocate. So this is how we do this day by day by day by day. And then here, in this case, the earliest material availability date for a component would be the Monday. Here would be none, it would be Wednesday, and here would be none because we couldn't make the allocation. Okay, so typically, and this is something that I said earlier, a production order requires or has multiple components. So if all components are available in the look ahead window timeframe, so this is the timeframe that you can define for which you do this day by day calculation and allocation. And if all components are available, then each component line gets an EMAT. So we either allocate full or none. And then we take the latest earliest material availability date of all component line as the earliest material availability date for the production order. So here's the example. We have one production order that has 3 components, and for the first component the EMAT is the December 1st, for the second component the EMAT is November 20, and for the third component EMAT is December 4. So the EMAT for this overall production order, so the date when all required material is available at earliest, is December 4, because this is the latest date here. And this is how we set the EMAT for every production order. And now I know that was a lot of theory, and now let's have a look how this actually is in Business Central. And let me quickly get in here again. So now there were 2 things that I was referring to that you can set up. So I'm in a Business Central environment. I have the VAPS installed. We have the VAPS menu, and typically you work in the area that we call simulations, and I will come to simulations in the second part of this webinar. So for now, take this as granted. And then we have all these areas where you can do setup. And there is this general VAPS setup, which as of now only lets you do one thing, and this is related to material availability, and this is what we call the look ahead window. And of course I can change it, and I can say, okay, I want to do it only 9 weeks. So the look ahead window describes the time frame from today, so from the work date, and now 9 weeks out, so from the work date for the next 9 weeks. Whenever I do the EMAT calculation, I will do for every day for the next 9 weeks this allocation I just spoke about. So this is really a sensitive figure here because you can imagine that the EMAT allocation and EMAT calculation might take a while depending on the amount of component need and component supply you have. So I highly recommend that you make wise use of this option and not let this calculation go for an infinite time frame, although your production scheduling need is only for the next 6 weeks. So make this setting here in sync with your scheduling window, with your scheduling time frame. Okay, so this is the first setting that we can do. The second setting is that we can say, and this is the EMAT demand priority. From here, I can define which type of, let's say, document demand gets fulfilled first. And in my case, I said, okay, I want to first fulfill the demand from a sales order. This is, in my case, in my company, this is the most important component demand. Whenever there is something that I can sell, I want to sell it. Okay, so if there's a component I can sell and this is requested from a sales order, boom, allocated to there. Then it's the production order, then it's the assembly component, but of course I can edit this and I would be able to add more priorities here and also more document types. Okay, but in my case, I just said, okay, I only have here sales orders, production orders, assembly orders in my sample company. So this is the priority that you can set for the allocation. So these are the two settings, and typically you do the settings once. Then we enter the simulation area. And I told you that we need to actually do this EMAT allocation by pressing a button. And when we are in the simulation area, the icons and the options that you see here, and we will talk about this in the second section of the webinar in more details. This follows a workflow structure. So first we need to do the EMAT calculation, then we create the simulation, then we view it, we may update it, and then we publish it. So let's do the first things first, and let's do the EMAT allocation. So when you do this, you see the last allocation that I did. And by the way, the moment when this was last done is also shown here. So in this info on the bottom of the page, you see the last date when the early material availability was calculated. And for me, this was actually yesterday. So I did it yesterday at 4 p.m. So maybe this information is no longer current. So it would be clever to calculate it again. So now I can see which kind of allocations I did yesterday, but I can also say clear this because now since yesterday things may have changed. So may have set up new purchase order for new components. I may have finished some components on production orders. So now let's calculate this again. And now we're making for this 9 weeks out from my work date. I made this allocation of component demand, of component supply, and then we can see which item number that we have, that it is allocated to which document it has been allocated and on which date. And we can also see the demand list, so the things that were requested. And of course, you can filter on all of these pages. But now I made the calculation of the earliest material availability date based on all information I have in my business center. So based on my inventory, based on my purchase orders, based on my production orders, based on my sales orders. So I brought this all together to calculate the earliest material availability date. So now, how does this earliest material availability date come into play when we go into the visual scheduler? So now let's create a new simulation, and we can ignore this because I will talk about this in a minute, but what is important is we have the capability that we can say that when we open the visual scheduler, how it should look like. So we have, and here we include planned production orders and firm planned and released. I define a time frame, and I can say simulation created. Let me do this now in webinar. And we can do a default view color type. And this is interesting because here you can say that when you open the visual scheduler, how should it look like? Which question do you want to focus? And mine is set, because I did it last time, on the I was focusing on the production order, but now because the material availability becomes interesting, I say, hey, give me the information by availability of the material. And so now I'm creating the simulation, and I tell you what this means in a couple of minutes. And then I can go into the visual scheduler and look at my schedule in a graphical way and see the information and everything in my production schedule just in green and red, indicating to me if material is available or not. So this is now the availability view, and each of these boxes that represent an operation from a production order is either green or red. So green means it is scheduled at a point of time after the material availability date, so I have no issue. And red tells me that I have an issue with this because this production order or this operation actually is scheduled to be started before the earliest material availability date. So I made a scheduling mistake. I scheduled it to happen on February the 1st, but the material is not there based on the EMAT allocation I just did. So now the question is, when is the material available? So when would this turn from red to green? Well, in the second that I start moving this, you see my screen changes. And first, if you look to the left, you see that now what is called standby, cutting 1, cutting 2, cutting 3 is highlighted. So these are my allowed resources. So first we do we highlight which resources are allowed or which machine centers are allowed and which are not. But then if you start looking to the right, then you see this gray curtain here at the border between Thursday the 4th of February and Friday the 5th of February. So this gray border here, and this gray border indicates the earliest material availability date. So after that gray border, the background is light, and this means this is an area where the material for this production order is available. So if I drop it here, you see the color changes because now it's starting after the earliest material availability date, which is, as we have seen, the 5th of February. Let me quickly move this back, and now let's look where we could have also spotted this information. Well, so first we see it red again. What we can do in the VAPS, we can double click the operation and then the production order card opens. So now in the production order card, nothing critical here, but we can go and look at the components because obviously there are components that are not yet available to start this production order because we're trying to start it on the we are trying to start it here on the 1st of February, whereas the earliest material availability date is the 5th of February. And so there seem to be components that are not available on the 1st of February. And here, for the purpose also of this webinar, I made the case very simple. We just need one item, and we not just need one item on the 1st of February, and this item is called raw material. And so now let's look why this material is not available at the 1st of February, but is available or will be available on the 5th of February. So let's quickly look at the item. And let's say view. Okay, so we see now that we have no single piece of my item called raw material on stock. but we see that we actually expect to get 5,000 units from purchase order. And if you remember right, there were kind of 500 something that we needed for this production order. So now let's look at the purchase order that we have here. And actually, to keep the case simple, it is just one purchase order that brings me 5,000 units of raw material. And I have no reservations on them as far as I know. But I allocated parts of it to the production order that we just looked at. So let's look at the purchase order first. That brings me this 5,000 units of the raw material. So what I see from here is that I expect to receive these 5,000 units of my raw material on the 5th of February. And the 5th of February is, as you remember, my earliest material availability date for this production order. So now let's get back to the production order component line and close all these pages. And now if I scroll a little bit to the right here, then we actually see that we enhance this production order components table by the column earliest material availability date. This is the 5th of February. This is when we have sufficient supply of raw material to fulfill this demand. And we say earliest material availability allocation, yes, it is allocated. And now if there would be more components and there would be different dates, we would take the latest date that we find here as the earliest material availability date for the production order. And then we use this information, and this information was generated when I clicked the button calculate allocations. Then all these dates are generated on all component lines, and then we push up the earliest material availability on production order level, and then we can use it in the visualization to when we are in the availability view to determine between not the material is available and material is not available, and independent if we are in the material availability view or if we are in any other view. So let me quickly switch the colors and say, okay, now I'm looking at the production order status view where everything is like in our VPS colored by the production order status, independent if this is planned, firm planned or released. Also in this view, we know the earliest material availability date. So when I start moving it, you actually see this gray curtain coming up. And when I just zoom out a bit, then you see there's actually something that we call the required due date. So when I have a higher resolution, then we see actually this left-handed curtain. This is the earliest material availability date, and the right-handed curtain, this is the required due date. So these are the days in which I can maneuver with this production order. So this is something that we brought into the Visual Advanced Production Scheduler, which is not part of Standard Business Central, where we enhanced Standard Business Central like we enhanced Business Central with finite capacity scheduling skills, as I showed you last time. So here we enhanced it by the capability to make these earliest material availability calculations. And I see that I guess the question and the guy left the meeting, so I will answer it. If you're back in the meeting, I see that you left the meeting. If you're back in the meeting, just type in, yes, I'm back, then I will answer the question. Otherwise, I will answer it via email. Okay, so then let's continue with the second element that makes the VAPS advanced, and this is what we call the production simulations. And here the idea of the production simulations is we never want you or your customers to schedule directly on the live production data. So when people schedule with the VAPS, and because the VAPS with all its finite capacity scheduling and with all the scheduling tools we spoke about 2 weeks ago, it has really the power to build good plans, but it also has the power to quickly destroy a plan, because there are a lot of there can be a lot of implications when you just drag and drop something and then trigger the finite capacity scheduling. So what we want your customers, or if you're a customer, what we want you to do is that you simulate first. That means literally we want you to create a copy of your production data. Then based on this copied data, simulate a new schedule. Then iterate as often as you need. And then if you found a simulation or a new scenario that fits your or that meets your goals best, then take this simulation and make it your new schedule by publishing it. So this is what we allow you to do. We allow you to create a copy of your data, plan on this copied data, do this as often as you like, and then compare and publish what is best. So there is the workflow, and we saw it. It is calculate the EMAT date, then create the simulation, and I did this already. Then view the simulation, which we did also. This was when I clicked on this link and we saw the graphical, but we can also update an outdated simulation and we can publish the simulation. And publish simulation means writing it back into the database and have a new live schedule. So let's talk a little bit about update simulation. And this is one of the tricky things in which you stumble when you build a product. And we actually have, when we look at this, I can't see it here. When we look at the product in a couple of minutes, then we actually have two different statuses of a simulation. A simulation can be outdated, which means it is incomplete. So something like this really is incomplete. And when we look at this puzzle, we call this invalid. So everything has been kind of moved around and thrown apart, and you don't see the overall, and you have no chance to see what this image is. Here I still can see what the picture was, although a part is missing. And then I can quickly update this by adding this piece, and then I have the full picture again. So this is what we call this symbolizes what we call outdated. This is invalid. No chance for you to get quickly to the full picture again. So there are actually or let's drill into this a little bit more. So outdated means that while you have a simulation open, or while you have a simulation created, you added data to Business Central, or you changed some data, and now you have in the simulation dataset A and in Business Central dataset B, and now the data set in your simulation is incomplete, but you have the capability to kind of add the data that you added to Business Central also to the simulation. And then invalid means that something was made in Business Central that makes your simulation no longer usable. And there are some basic impacts. So if it is outdated, you as a user can fix it. So you can update it. But if a simulation is outdated, you can open it, but it is read-only. Okay, because something has changed in your Business Central data, and we want you to make the simulation on the best possible data set. So you need to update it, and then you can change it again, and then you can publish. If it is invalid, you can look at it, but you have no chance to fix it. You can just see how it was before you broke things. And what we try to do, because an invalid simulation is really a pain in the, you know what I want to say? So we kind of really try to reduce the cases that this can happen, but it can happen. And so what are the cases where a simulation gets invalid? And this is only if you do a master data change in Business Central. And basically, if you, from Business Central, change capacity entries. And if these changes fall into the time frame of your simulation, then the simulation becomes invalid and no longer usable. So if you need to make capacity entries, changes, if you need to add, delete, or change them, make sure that you don't have a simulation open. This is really crucial. All the other things that you can do to Business Central may also have an impact, but then it is just that they outdate a simulation. So if you change a production order, so if you change the status, or if you create new production orders. So all of these cases just make a, now if you have a simulation and then you create a new production order and then the old simulation is outdated because it does not include this production order, and then you can say update and it's there. You can change the capacity interest via the VAPS. So this is if you define additional downtime or uptime. This will not make the other things invalid. We just take this into account, but it is really hard for us to kind of recognize that you make changes to the capacity interest when you do it from Business Central. So if you do it, make sure you have no simulations open. But if you just want to define additional uptime or downtime, do it from within the VAPS, and you have no issues with this. Okay, so I forgot my slide. Let's have a look. But I wanted to say, let's have a look. So let's switch to Business Central again. And we are in the simulation area. And we have this simulation here that we just created. And what we just learned is I created the simulation say 20 minutes ago or so. And now we see it is neither invalid nor outdated. But we learned that, for example, when I now add a production order, and now maybe let me add a planned production order. If I add a planned production order, then the simulation becomes invalid. And this is only one example, but I could also now change whatever the setup time on an existing production order. I can change the quantity on an existing production order. Then I change data in Business Central and have then a difference between what is in Business Central and in the VAPS. But now let me do the simple case. I add a production order. Maybe let's do a bicycle. What else? And not do 1, but let's do 25. Let's have them in whatever, February, don't know. And let me pick a fancy color for those bicycles. Bicycle is a green device. Whoop. So it's that green that we use to see it. And then I refresh the production order. And now I added a production order to Business Central, which is not part of the simulation that I created before. And now you see, bam, all of these production simulations that I had before, they are marked as outdated because now the data that we have in this simulation is different than my production data for the given time frame in Business Central. So now when I open this simulation, which is outdated, I can still do this. I can see what I did before, but you see it opens in read only. This thing is red, and then if this is red, I know this is in read only, but I see, hey, actually this is how it was before, and yeah, right, I moved this to here to meet the material availability date. But the production order that I just added is not part of the schedule. But what I can do is I can select the simulation and I can say update. And now we are adding all those data that we added to Business Central also to the simulation, and we also update the data accordingly. Okay, so now and now we can look at the simulation again, but I now don't want to look at it in the availability view. So maybe sorry, wrong button. I added it and say, hey, if you open this simulation, let's show it in the production order view, because now the color of the production order is, and you can click here on this link, or you can click here. Both brings you to view simulation. And now we need to look out for this green one that we just created, and it was a bicycle, so I think it's somewhere down here. So here is the production order that we just added. The rest is as we had before, but now this production order that we just added to Business Central is also part of my overall schedule, and now I can bring it to the schedule with all the tools that I have and that I showed you in the finite capacity scheduling webinar 2 weeks ago. So have a look there if you want to know more about how to add things to the schedule, but we will do it a little bit in 5 to 10 minutes when we speak about alternative machine centers. So now that I have this simulation, I also can say, okay, actually, I want to focus on, I don't care about planned production, but I just want to focus on firm planned production orders, and I want to see them now by whatever. Again, by the production order view, and I want to change the time frame. So maybe I want to do it like this and not until June, but now I'm really looking only at end of April. So I can do it like this, and I can create a second simulation, make changes, and then if I'm good with the changes that I'm making, so let me do this. First, sorry for that. I was a little bit too fast. There is actually a hidden function, and this is hidden behind these 3 dots. So we talked about EMAT allocations, create simulation, view simulation, which is the same as clicking this link. So I always click this link because it's faster. We can update the simulation that is outdated, and we can publish it, which is right back into Business Central. And then here we actually have something that we call view simulation data. This is something that we use quite frequently. It's interesting. I created the simulation, and here I actually can see what is part of the simulation, which production order of which number, which status, what is the works and what is the machine center. And we can also see which of those have been scheduled by the VAPS. So we give everything that we schedule with the VAPS and then publish back to Business Central. We give it a flag scheduled by Business Central, by VAPS, and everything that not yet was scheduled by the VAPS gets the standby resource flag. So this is something I need to take care of. And then there are the information if this is pinned, if this is not pinned, if it's changed. So you can see actually a lot of information about which data are in your simulation and how we treat this data. So from time to time, it is useful also to have a look here. And then if you now I created the simulation, and now I can make changes to the schedule again. And now let's have a quick look. The production order that was late, so which was this one here, now is back on that day before the earliest material availability date, because I created a new simulation. This new simulation takes data from Business Central, and I did not save this simulation back to Business Central, so I did not publish it. If I would have published it and then created a new simulation, then this production order actually would show the new date. Okay, so this is how you now can build various simulations. Right now, you can only compare them by opening in and looking at them. But, and this is something I will also talk about at the very end of the webinar, we are working on ways that you also have a compare simulations button that you can compare them by a given set of KPIs. But you have the capability to run different simulations, to build different schedules, to maintain everything from within Business Central. And once you are happy with what you did, then you can publish and then you update Business Central. And if you add stuff to Business Central and have a simulation existing, then you can very easily update it and fetch the latest data, the latest information from Business Central. And then last but not least, what is also an important element of the Visual Advanced Production Scheduler, and where we made an enhancement to Business Central, is that we allow you to define alternative machine centers. So when we look at the general VAPS menu, we have alternate routings. And here, the way how we do is we allow you to define set of alternative machine centers. So in this case that we see here, I said I may have a situation where my machine cutting 1 and cutting 2 are allowed alternatives, and they take the same time to set up, but cutting machine 2 runs a little bit slower. So there is a runtime multiplier that compares this, and while this is 1, this is 1.25, and with this I'm telling the software, okay, cutting 2 is an allowed alternative. It takes the same time to set it up, but the machine runs a little bit slower, so the production time per unit, as you can also call it, is longer. So what you need to do is, first, you can define as many of these sets as you like. Then you need to add these sets to the respective routing. And if you create a new production order, then these alternative sets automatically get applied. But if you have already production orders in the system, you need to refresh them to apply the alternative routings to them. And again, I forgot the demo slide, but we can nevertheless have a demo. So first thing, now let's go to my released production orders and see how this comes into play. And we go to this production order 10-10-40, which will show in red in the VAPS. And we see it has one production order line, and we can drill down into the routing lines. And then in the routing lines, we see we have 5 routing steps: drilling, milling, cutting, assembly, and inspection. And we see our default machine center. This comes from the standard routing, but we see there is always alternatives. And when you see here my third operation, cutting, then this is actually the same that we saw in the screenshots. So now here is I have 2 allowed machines, cutting 1, cutting 2. It takes the same time to set them up, but machine 2 runs a little bit slower. So the ending time given the same start time would be later than if it would run on cutting 2. Okay, so now business centric, this production order and this production orders routing knows about the allowed alternative. So where do they come from? And with this, let's keep this production order in mind that we just looked at, and now let's look first how these alternative routings come from. Well, first you need to create them, and you can create them under NETRONIC VAPS alternate routings. And here you can add as many alternatives as you like. This is a very simple one. I just said, okay, there might be cases where I want to do something on an assembly station. I have 4 assembly stations and they are all the same. And basically, if I add an alternate routing set to my production order, to my routing, I literally say, okay, I want the VAPS to find the best possible assembly station, so those assembly stations that can get the job done at earliest. So very simple. Here, this is the one that we saw before, and it's a little bit trickier because actually I have 3 cutting machines, as you can see from this set. So I have 3 cutting machines, and here in this simple cutting one, I say they are all equal. But I might have cases where I don't want to use my cutting machine 3, where I say, okay, preferably I do this on machine 1, but there is an alternative, and this is machine 2, but this machine runs a little bit slower. So now I can define as many of these sets as I like, and this can be hard work, but I really recommend to do this work and to do these definitions, because if you do this, then you can really unleash the scheduling value of the VAPS, as I showed you in the webinar 2 weeks ago. But if once they are all defined, then we can look at the routings. And obviously I did this work in advance. So now let's look at a hub, which is the one that we produce with the production that we look at. And you see, this is a very standard Business Central routing card. The only thing that is changed is we added this column, and with this column, you now specify the allowed alternative. So now this routing actually has to be read like, okay, the third operation goes to, by default, goes to machine center 110, cutting 1, but cutting 2, which we would see from here, is an allowed alternative. Okay, the first operation goes to drilling 1, but all the other drilling machines are allowed as alternatives. And now let me just create a new simulation. Anyway, we can also look at this one. So now when we look at the schedule, and the one that the production that we looked at is this red one here, which is still on the standby resource because I added it to Business Central, but not yet to the VAPS. And now I can add this to the schedule using finite capacity scheduling, and I explained the methods, but here, for the sake of this webinar, you can say add this to the schedule and apply the standard routing. So then we are only looking into the resources or into the work centers, into the machine centers that you define in the standard routing. So, and the standard routing was drilling 1. Drilling 1 is already busy, so we add it to the end of the queue of operations here on that machine. Then it can go to milling, then it can go to cutting, and so on and so forth. And we see it needs to wait here again on assembly station 2, and on inspection table 1 we can start, but hey, we finish past the required due date. So this is how the system would behave if you don't define alternatives. But if you take time to define alternatives, and if you have alternative machine centers, then you can actually tell the VAPS, hey, add this production order to the schedule, and within all allowed alternatives, find those alternatives that can get this production order done fastest. And this is what we call apply alternative routing. So now I'm looking within all allowed alternatives for the earliest free spot, and I know drilling 2 is allowed, so I move it to here. Milling 1 is allowed, I move it to here. Cutting 1, this is the standard resource, and we don't use the other because it takes longer. And then, wow, assembly 4 is allowed because I have this simple set of assembly alternatives. And now, by just using the alternative resources that I defined before, I'm finishing this before the due date. So from all the things that from all the 3 features that we talked about for the alternative routings, I used the lowest amount of slides to introduce it to you, but I can ensure you that for you this takes the most time to set it up. But I I really recommend to make use of this because this makes scheduling very powerful. And then you have the finite capacity scheduling, you have the capability to add production orders to the schedule, looking for the alternative routings, you have material availability information, and you can build various simulations for your production schedule before you save it back. And the total of these features and a little more subtle things that we didn't cover explicitly, but like you saw, the implicit change of the colors and change of the focus, this is what really makes the Visual Advanced Production Scheduler advanced, and advanced compared to pure drag and drop solutions like our own Visual Production Scheduler, but also advanced compared to what you can achieve with standard Business Central manufacturing. And with this, let's look what is going to come. what is going to come is definitively capability to, that we call fill gaps, so more scheduling tools. And what is also going to come is that you get the capability to compare the simulations that you create by some KPIs. And with this, I'm in time, so well scheduled, in time with the content I prepared. I don't see that there are any other questions. So if you have questions, then ask them now or send me an email, connect with me on LinkedIn, send the question via Twitter. I'm happy to answer it, whatever is the best way for you to get questions answered. You can also call me and then we have a Teams call or whatever. So I'm really interested in the conversation and I'm really interested in your suggestion. What should be the topics for the next webinars? And with this, thank you very much for joining me today, for your attention, and please all stay safe and healthy. Thanks. Goodbye.